Well, it's been 9 videos, quadrillions of damage, countless dead warrior spirit heavies, but it's all gonna end here with Spy's maximum damage. Though Spy does have the second least number of damage dealing weapons in the game, with just 10. And all of his melees have the exact same damage values. So, I'll have to try to keep things as interesting here as I can. Like, did you know that you could survive a fully charged headshot from the sniper rifle with a dead ringer, but not from the Machina? See, that 15% damage bonus comes in handy for headshots too. It's not just a body shotgun. And speaking of the dead ringer, Spy actually gets a bigger speed boost from speed boosts than Medic does despite having the same run speed. The effect of a speed boost normally varies from class to class, with the slower classes getting bigger speed boosts than the faster ones. And even though Spy's movement speed was increased in Meet Your Match, he still gets a 35% boost like Engineer, Pyro, and Sniper, instead of the 32.8% boost that Medic gets. Meaning that he runs 7 hammer units faster than Medic when boosted. And now you know, that's some handy information. But before we get too far into it, we do have a message from today's sponsor, Manscaped.com, and their Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. What a name! Not 2.0, not 3.0, not 6.0, but 5.0. And this Ultra package includes the Lawnmower 5.0 with its foil blade, designed to leave you with a finish that's super sleek and super smooth. It also comes with the Weed Whacker 2.0 that's skin safe, trademarked, for trimming up your nose and ear hair, as well as the Crop Smoother and Crop Preserver deodorant and aftershave. Wow, they sure thought of everything, but if only this came with a shirt and boxers too. Wait a minute, it does just that. Wow, incredible. And if you want to head over to Manscaped.com right now, you can use the promo code SquimJim to get this Performance Package 5.0 Ultra for 20% off with free international shipping. So what are you scared of? That you're gonna look too good? Go check it out. Alright, starting off with Spy's primary weapons, he doesn't have any. The revolvers are considered secondary weapons for some reason. Most likely because the tranquilizer gun was supposed to be his primary before it was scrapped. I'm not sure why they never reclassified the revolver, but it is still a secondary. So, moving on to Spy's secondaries, the revolver is going to follow our usual pattern of dealing its max damage with mini crits and strength power-up against a warrior spirit heavy, which is 210 damage. Though doing the math out would bring it to 210.6, and usually these things would round up, but I guess for some reason here it's not. I have seen some people say that damage rounds down in this game, but that's never usually been the case. It gets a little bit weirder with the Diamondback and the Ambassador dealing a max of 178, because the math would show it dealing a solid 179. So that shouldn't be rounding down to 178 at all. Also yeah, nothing special happens with a headshot from the Ambassador, even with power-ups. Even the Precision power-up, which is also supposed to remove fall-off, will not have any impact on the Ambassador's crit fall-off. So unfortunately, there's no reliving the Ambassador's glory days in manpower. But then, L'Étranger has a max damage of 168, and the Enforcer will deal Spy's maximum secondary damage when disguised at 252, which is pretty good, I guess, but none of them are capable of one-shotting a heavy, which is kind of a shame. Then for their minimums, the Revolver deals 1, the Ambassador, Diamondback, and L'Étranger will deal 0, and the Enforcer, with its ability to pierce resistances, will deal 11, which, normally the Revolver's minimum damage at long range should be 21, but as it turns out, something is still being resisted here. Originally, when they added this pierce effect to the Enforcer, it barely worked at all, but it has since mostly been fixed. It will bypass the Vaccinator, it will bypass the Fist of Steel, and it does bypass the Battalion's backup, but it does not work against manpower power-ups. So that minimum damage is reduced from 21 to 11, and you can see here how the damage does round up. But that does mean that the Enforcer takes home the trophy of the highest damage and the highest lowest damage. The modern Enforcer finally wins something! Though, as a quick aside, I really don't think the Enforcer is a bad weapon, and I don't really fully understand why it gets that reputation. I don't think it's a conceptually well-designed weapon, but I don't think it's particularly weak. The two upsides are both fairly situational, but the downside is that it fires 20% slower. Situational upsides for a kind of nothing downside. I mean, how often are you just going to hold down the fire button with a revolver? And I guess it does have no random crits for some reason, which is also a downside, but it barely counts. I'd like to see the whole weapon get a bit of a rework, but I don't think it's bad. I think it's about on par with a stock revolver. Anyway, for the knives, well, they all have the same damage values for their normal attacks and their backstabs. Their base damage is 40, and then backstabs will deal 2 times the target's current health, and also crit, which is another 3 times. So effectively, backstabs do 6 times the target's current health. If you backstab a full health heavy, it's 300 times 6, so 1,800 damage. Even a crit front stab against a Fist of Steel Heavy only maxes out at 240. But did you know that the Battalion's backup, which normally negates all crit damage, can't stop crits from a backstab? This stab still crits and still ends up dealing 6 times the damage. Even the Battalion's normal 35% resistance is bypassed here. The resistance power-up also blocks crits, but since Jungle Inferno, it also straight up blocks backstabs too. Backstabbing a player with the resistance power-up will act in the exact same way that backstabbing a Razorback does. In fact, you know how when you're using the Razorback and you get backstabbed, it forces you out of scoping? If you're playing Sniper with the resistance power-up, it'll do that too. So it's clearly just the exact same effect. But the Vampire and Plague power-ups also provide resistance, though those have no effect on backstabs either. Vampire gives 25% resistance, but the backstab still deals 1,800, and Plague causes you to deal half damage to the player that infected you, but the backstab will still deal 1,800. One of the only things I could find that visibly reduces backstab damage is the Natasha and the Brass Beast resistance when below half health. You can see at 150 health, a backstab will deal 900 to this Brass Beast Heavy, but when he's spun up at that health, it only deals 840. The Brass Beast resistance actually doesn't affect critical damage, so it's still dealing 600 crit damage, but the previous 300 backstab damage is reduced by 20% to 240, and then they combine to 840. That of course does still kill, but that is a 60 damage reduction. Oh boy. So, unfortunately, there doesn't appear to be a way to live a backstab without straight up being immune to it like you would be with the Razorback. Though I don't know how many people actually remember this, but back when the Dead Ringer's resistance was 90%, and yes, it was 90% throughout the entire cloak duration, you could actually survive a backstab with it. And pretty comfortably, too. A backstab against a full health spy with a Dead Ringer out would only deal 75 damage. But since the resistance was reduced, that's no longer the case, and a backstab will always kill. But I actually found a very odd bug that I don't think has been previously discovered. If you're using the Brass Beast or the Natasha and have below 50% health and also have the resistance power up, for whatever reason, when you spin up, you no longer have the power-up's backstab immunity. I have no idea why, but you can be backstabbed like this and it will block the crit damage and deal reduced damage. Like here, the Natasha Heavy has 150 health, and when I backstab him, it deals 120. This should be dealing 900, then without the critical damage it should be dealing 300, but with the resistance power up it cuts it down to 150, and then the Natasha's resistance brings it down to a livable 120 damage. So, there is actually still a way to survive a real backstab in Team Fortress 2. It's just one that you should normally be taking 0 damage from. But, I still think that's pretty funny. That stat on the Natasha and the Brass Beast is just a mess. But it does mean you can also use this setup to deliver the lowest damage for all of Spy's knives, which is 1 against a 1 health heavy. Normally this would deal 6 damage, but with all that resistance and crit immunity, this backstab only deals 1. Ironically, a front stab would be dealing more here. But now let's talk about the max backstab damage, or max stab damage as we call it in the industry. And it is a melee weapon, so the Fist of Steel will increase its damage. Backstabbing a full health Fist of Steel Heavy will increase it to 3,600 damage. And if that Fist of Steel Heavy is fully overhealed before switching to the Fist of Steel, that backstab will deal 5,400 damage. But there is one more way we can go further. The Knockout power-up will increase Heavy's max health to 425. And power-ups do normally affect overheal, but if the Heavy is already being healed when he collects that power-up, he's able to bypass that penalty, bringing him to 635 overheal and making TF2's highest possible backstab damage 7,620. And that is an incredibly high damage, more than the vast majority of weapons in this game are capable of. But I still wasn't really fully satisfied with that. I mean, yeah, 7,620 is, I believe, the highest possible backstab damage Spy can organically do in TF2 without the use of cheats. But what if we were using cheats? Condition 74 will make you a giant and multiply your health by 10, meaning this Heavy will have 4,500 health with overheal. If he takes out the Fist of Steel and gets backstabbed, it's going to deal 21,220 damage. And that is a lot of damage. But it's actually less than half of what it should be doing. 4,500 times 6 times 2 should be 54,000 damage, not 21,220. And it's not like this effect reduces backstab damage, because backstabbing this giant Heavy without overheal or the Fist of Steel will deal 18,000. So, I really don't know where all that extra damage is going. In fact, you can also use the command hurt me, and then use a negative number to give players crazy high overheal. Like this Heavy has over 100,000 health with overheal, but that backstab is only dealing 9,840. And that's kinda disappointing. You might even remember that in the Mantreads follow-up video, I found a plugin that will let you change classes' health. And I was able to determine at the time that the max health was 2,147,483,527. And I was hoping that for this video I would be able to get a backstab against the player with that health, but unfortunately I'm no longer able to get that plugin to work. After the 64-bit update, some plugins have been kind of wonky, and I actually couldn't even get source mod to work at all. There's a decent chance that the damage might be capped somewhere like it is for the Giants, but hypothetically, if a heavy with the Fist of Steel had 2 billion health and was backstabbed, you could deal 25,769,799,924 damage. Which would have been fun to see if, it worked. It's no Mantreads, but it's probably the closest second thing. So that was a bit of a letdown. But you know what never lets us down? Taunt kills! And for some reason, Spy's fencing taunt is not considered melee damage. It will not deal extra damage to the Fist of Steel, and unlike some of the other melee taunt kills, it's not considered bullet damage either, making the minimum damage 7, 7, and then 130. But this is one of those taunts that can hit multiple targets, and one of relatively few taunts that can destroy buildings, by the way. But with strength and mini-crits, the fencing taunt can deal 87,750 damage against 50 Warrior Spirit Heavies. I mean, backstabbing each of them would have dealt more damage, but this is faster. And following some of the other classes, I think Spy's max damage, while still very impressive, came up being a little bit underwhelming. But the knives are still easily top tier in this tier list. And this tier list that you're seeing right here is just against one target and only factoring in one hit. But it will take into account fire and bleed caused by that one hit. Though if we're factoring in the ability to hit multiple targets, then anything involving explosions gets a big jump ahead. Well, except for the short circuit, that only goes up 2 tiers, because for some reason it's only capable of hitting a few players at once. Somehow, even the Rap Assassin is able to deal this much splash damage against 50 targets. And if you were wondering why Scout's melees are generally so high on this tier list, it's actually because in the Scout video, I forgot to take into account the Isolations pack, which increases Scout's melee base damage to 175 against the Pyro with the Isolated Merc set, making a critical hit from the bat do 525 damage. So Scout's melees go from one of the weakest to one of the strongest here. And this ends up being the tier list for the minimum damage, with those able to deal 0 damage at the top, and those lonely few dealing 20 plus at the bottom. But hey, that's been the full min and max damage series. The only thing I could possibly maybe do for another video in this series would be zombies. I might look more into that around Halloween, but if that does sound interesting, you let me know. And if you do have any other ideas for this specific series, you could let me know that too. Otherwise, it's time to start on some new projects. I can think of a certain TF2 versus TFC series that's been very much neglected lately, so I'll get started on that one pretty soon. And anyway, thanks for watching, and a special thanks to my patrons like Varric, Captain Forex, Eggox, Colonel, Probably Vinegar, Caponicus, Kelso the Pirate, Pillsman's Fox, Some Crazy Idiot, Ozond, She-Shells, Salt God, Lavi, Taupe, Time Consuming, Man344, Nolan46, and Melodici.